navegar, navegar. Y se marchó, y a su barco.
Welcome to Guys Open. I'm your host, Christopher Fisher, and today we got on Warren McGrew, and we are going to talk about Calvinism. Warren, you watched this open panel discussion, Calvinism. Chris State and Colton Carson takes on all opponents. What's your initial impressions?
Obviously, I disagree with these gentlemen. There were a couple things that I watched and I was like, I wish they would have had a moment. And I think this is a new format. So I think Marlon's kind of figuring this out. They're kind of kicking the tires a little bit, but I wish they'd each had a moment, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, where they could have given a positive case for what they believe, why they believe that. Because I think it was more or less just immediate into the Q&A, and no two Calvinists, no two Baptists, no two whatever have the exact same view. And so, there would be times where Colton would be like, no, I can't affirm that. And Chris would be like, I absolutely affirm that. And so it was kind of hard for those that were questioning them, I think, to get kind of a take on where they were coming from. And Chris wasn't the most atypical, he wasn't the most normal Calvinist position. Like he would concede like Romans 9 and 1 Corinthians 2:14, and so it was a little interesting. But overall I liked it a lot. You could see Chris was getting flustered throughout the debate. It was pretty bad. I like Chris a lot. I really do, even though we disagree on much. He actually was the tipping point in pushing me towards like a conditional immortality view. I was on the fence until I spoke with him. So, and it's not like I disagree with him on everything. I have a lot of respect for Chris, but he did not carry himself very well in this Q&A. And both of these gentlemen seem to be extremely focused on the philosophy. And in part, it was, I think, in response to some of the questions that were coming. But that was the overall appearance. This was more of a philosophical discussion of theistic determinism versus libertarian free will, and if you can have some sort of epistemic justification, even if it's a false belief. And it wasn't a very scripturally grounded discussion, and not all of them have to be. But overall, I left watching it going, yeah, I wasn't that impressed.
Yeah, that seems to be
tremendously brilliant guys, but just not impressed.
That seems to be a Chris State thing. Instead of reading the Bible with exegesis in mind, it's always through a lens of determinism. He reads a verse and he's like, how does this fit determinism, rather than getting determinism out of the verse. But I cut you off before you could say hi. So maybe say hi to the audience. I'm going to force you to now, awkwardly. And What are we drinking tonight?
I was gifted by a client, some 12-year-old whistle pig, and I'm not a drinker, so I take a sip of this. It's my good night medicine, and then I wash it down with what I really prefer, Diet Coke.
Oh yeah, that's aspartame you're putting into your body, my friend.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a good counterbalance for the whistle pig.
I hope the whiskey kills the cancer. That's what I'm hoping. So, I understand that you came into a lot of money recently, and all these women are in your DMs asking about your multi-millions.
Yes. I'm a multi-millionaire, and it's all thanks to you. And I don't know, was that Photoshop or was that Canva? I don't know. But I think you had created a meme of false teachers, and you had interjected me, Drew McLeod, and yourself, and you'd given us each like a dollar value in keeping with that meme. I think your net worth was like 17,000. Mine was like 462 million. And I think Drew's was like $52.
Yeah, I think he's like an itinerant preacher or something like that. That's my feeling.
And so I had a lot of people reaching out to me, and they're like, "Have you seen this? Are you secretly wealthy, Warren?" And I was like, yeah, I'm a multi-million, half a billion, in fact. Those are old numbers.
You're a roofing magnet.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
But yeah, that was
pick up nails, not women. Yeah, I'm a magnet.
Sounds good. So I did get a chance to watch the beginning part of this Calvinist panel discussion. And what struck me right away was how long the gospel truth let the open theists pontificate. It was like 2-minute points or questions where Chris Date and the other guy, Colton, were just sitting there listening to these guys go on. And I'm like, oh man, you got to cut off the question at some point. But that was interesting. And then it turned right away. It turned into this back and forth, like, oh, my biggest problem. They had Kevin Thompson on, and he's like, my biggest problem is semantically, gospel is not good news if read through the light of Calvinism. So I don't know. Maybe that's a good argument that's convincing to certain people. It is a moralistic fallacy. It is a semantic argument. So it didn't really strike me as like deep thinking or discussion just right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I'm sympathetic to Kevin. I understand the point he's trying to make. It's like the gospel's good news, but if God has eternally passed over a significant portion of mankind, never giving them an opportunity to believe, it's definitely not good for them. And the Calvinists would say, well, no, it's good news for those who believe, the elect. And so, they had their answer. Intuitively, you still go, it's not good news to all men. Maybe it's good news to all types of men that are elect. It's not. So, I mean, I understand the point Kevin was trying to make, but yeah, it wasn't the most, I think, biting. It didn't cut anybody off at the knees. It wasn't
right.
And I don't know if he was trying. I don't think he was trying to do that. I don't think Kevin came in there trying to be, some ruthless debater. And I know it seemed like he and Chris Date had their own history. If I understand what happened correctly, Kevin said he didn't think he thought Calvinism was a false gospel, and Chris was like, well, I won't debate anybody who thinks that I believe a set of doctrines that are based on a false gospel. And I was like, well, those are the people you should be debating. Like, it's why I'm willing to debate Calvinists. I mean, they'll call me a heretic, and I'll say, well, I think your doctrines are in error. Let's debate that.
Right. So my history with Chris Date, I don't know if you're aware or not, but he is having some debate in some place. Maybe it was like with Will Duffy or someone about open theism. And he pulled out this verse about what he claimed was a timeless proof text, God inhabiting eternity. And so I replied that the exact same phrase is used about man as God. And he was berating me on air, just the most shameless stuff. So I brought my dad on, and we did a response stream in which we roasted him because he was definitely wrong. And then a Hebrew scholar wrote an article defending the things I said and refuting Chris Date, that Chris Date's like, oh, those are different clauses. Those are different phrases. So definitely this one means that God is timeless and man is not, because of how the phrase is used. The Hebrew scholar came back and said, they're basically the same phrase. And so I posted that to him, and he was really bitter from my response stream that just riffed on him, just made fun of him and tore him apart. And so he blocked me and never talked to me again. So I don't feel like Chris Date is scholarly. I think he's very full of himself. And if he doesn't get the respect he thinks he should have, or if his points are just blatantly refuted, just like his inhabits eternity proof text, he gets really defensive and he doesn't have an actual answer. And so
I saw a lot of emotional responses from Chris. Like I said, there are things that I really like about Chris. I think that he is, at least in this scenario and a few others that I saw, when he's pressured on some things, he gets more emotional, and I think it's hard for him to maintain like a cool head. And I get it, because in those situations where the cameras are rolling and people are calling you wrong, it's real easy to get personally invested in this because you believe this. But you have to maintain some cool, kind of calm demeanor. And even in the comments, I was like, Chris, like, I disagree with you, but you need to calm down because you're doing your position a disservice. Like, just calm down. Like, you can take a minute, breathe, say, hey, I disagree with that. Take a minute. Like, you don't have to. It doesn't. Like, don't clutch your pearls. Don't call Leighton Flowers' arguments immature and juvenile, and like that's not a good solid response. Even if you truly believe Leighton's arguments are immature and juvenile, show that they're immature and juvenile with your questioning and your responses. That would be more of a successful response than just to, become upset and name call.
So like you, I'm drinking as well tonight, but my body, apparently, since I didn't drink like at all during college, like my body's just trying to like catch up. So I have high alcohol tolerance, probably from years of lacking drink. I was poor in college. I don't know if you've ever experienced being poor, Mr. Millionaire, but
it was only recently that I came into some Photoshop money. So it was up until about a week ago, I was just one of you common plebeian,
right.
Blue collar, brown collar types. It's only recently that I started golfing with Trump and Hunter Biden. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the only reason I'm drinking tonight is because I have to drive a whole ton of people around tonight. So I got to get in the spirit.
Well, it's like that old saying. It says, "I want to pass away, at peace, gently in my sleep, like my grandfather, and not the other people in the car with him that were screaming and terrified."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So here's the debate, the open theist take on all people. We're going to skip the beginning part because in my experience, that was kind of rambling and not very substantive. So tell us a good entry point for some sort of substance that we want to talk about.
Oh man, I'm not prepared with timestamps.
Uh-oh.
I came in at the last minute. I thought this was your show.
Yeah. Well, we could go to where apparently I've been told Vela pops on at some point.
That's
Calvinist
interesting.
Apostate.
It's interesting that they're bringing on someone who has called Jesus a lunatic. He said, no, he's not Looney Tunes, but he was deceived. He was self-deceived. He was wrong. He's called the God of the Bible, a Hebraic Megazeus, which ironically, he also called dynamic omniscience, the God portrayed there, a Hebraic Megazeus. And I think Tyler's starting to see the God of the Bible is a dynamic one.
But he doesn't want to say it though.
He doesn't.
But he knows it's true. And that is his reason. I got screenshots from him basically saying open theism is the reason he converted away from the Bible, because the Bible actually teaches open theism and not Calvinism. And then he'll go on and lie and say Calvinism was the thing that was keeping me Christian. Well, yeah, but it wasn't the Bible. The Calvinism was in opposition to the Bible, and that's why you converted away. So you don't.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're bringing on an apostate and somebody who has now made himself an enemy of the faith, in order to defend Calvinism. But I think he actually came on this program claiming that he had some good challenges for the Calvinist position. But I didn't watch much of him. When I see Tyler Vela, I react kind of like Chris Date to Leighton Flowers. So I'm very sympathetic to Chris. Like, we all have our kryptonite, and Tyler Vela has a tendency to get under my skin a little bit. But so I didn't really watch much of Vela's commentary, but I do. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. You know what? I'm a rebel. I'm going to do this in spite of you guys.
Hey, you're going to shoot aspartame in spite of us.
Shooting aspartame and drinking booze. How the mighty have fallen. But no, I don't know why they would bring Vela on. I think most of his criticisms of Christianity are going to be centered around divine hiddenness. But then he'll turn around and affirm theistic determinism. And I think he holds to a transcendent God that transcends existence, because he holds to a non-existent deity. That's kind of my takeaway from Vela.
Right. So here he is in the screenshot. Uh-oh. Do we dare do this? Oh, no.
We're going in blind, man. Neither one of us know what this guy's going to say.
I also heard Chris Date went on some rants. So if anyone's got a good Chris Date rant timestamp, that will be good as well. And so let's hear this. or hidden
push the
play.
button at any point in order to guarantee that what he is determined to happen, in fact, happens.
But in Franklin, he does. That's the issue.
I don't know enough about the Frankfurt style examples. So
well, the Frankfurt style example is basically if he's going to do.
So here's the problem with all these talking heads is they all want to talk at the same time. So it gets a little bit jumbled. And so a good moderator probably would be like, okay, cut someone off and tell them when to start and allow the conversation to flow naturally. But if there's too much crosstalk, you got to stop that because it's almost incomprehensible.
Yeah. And now one thing too to mention, you and I are going to be sitting in the hot seat like Chris and Colton were coming up. In December, we're scheduled to be on Marlon's program. You're going to be defending open theism at large. I'm going to be there more geared towards like a dynamic view, which is an open position. And one of the things I think we both have learned from this is that we need to have at least 5 minutes apiece to give a positive case for our position. And I think that we do need to make sure that when we're engaging someone, that there be like a minimum or a maximum amount of time that they're allowed to ask the question. And then we choose one of us to respond. And then maybe if the other person wants to interject, then they're given that so that you're not having that constant talk over because it gets too muddy.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know. December 16th, you say? I'd have to go check with my media handler who handles all my media appearances and verify that date.
Is that one of your 36 children?
Well, that would be awful. My media presence would be ruined. You think I'm ruining it? Wait till they can handle
kids YouTube talking about open theism.
Kids these days at school, it's like they're bucking the woke narrative, and so all their jokes are like all racism and like Hitler and stuff. My wife's like, "Why do our boys joke about Hitler?" I was walking to a high school football game, and they have pictures of all the football players on the sides, and they each get to have like one item with them. Like what one person has like his trumpet. I don't know, he plays trumpet or something, and the black player has like a chicken wing in his mouth. I had to feel it to make sure it was real. I'm like, what? This feels racist, but it's a self-deprecating joke culture that they're living in now, these kids. And so I think I'd get canceled really, really fast if I let any of these high schoolers manage any of my social media.
Oh yeah, no, like a lot of the kids will interject like self-depreciating racism at themselves as a joke, because it's gotten to the point where, like certain generations, it was kind of taboo. Other generations, it was like acceptance. And then other generations, it was like, oh, clutch your pearls. I'm offended. And then the next several generations are just like flat out, no hold bars, joking about it. Like it just has no meaning at all.
Right. Is nature healing? Are people gaining back senses of humor and able to take language that insults them?
Oh, well,
Maybe.
Like on my Facebook today, one of my Facebook friends, who's black, he's person of color, African American. I don't know what term is socially acceptable today. He had more melanin than me, and he had a picture on there of these cats that were, I think, AI generated, and each cat spelled out a different letter.
Oh no!
Very infamous word. It starts with an N. And I went on and I joked and I said, well, for the record, I've always been a dog person, I don't want to be accused of liking cats in the wrong context. But I think people are starting to get their sense of humor back and cutting up and joking. Right. I think that's a good thing.
Nature's healing.
Right. If he's going to do what God knows he's going to do, he doesn't push the button. If he's going to do what God doesn't want him to do, God pushes the button. And that's the Frankfurt.
So it's like if you're familiar with Bignon's bobsled, whenever Jones comes to a sinful action, and let's just say God does want him to do a sinful action, he refrains. It's the theory of privation.
Yes.
So he refrains and holds back his reins. So that means who's doing the action? It's in the circumstances and in his dispositional environment. God allows his sinfulness to just kind of permeate through that action to that event. Now, let's just say God wants to specifically engage and intervene. he would intervene in a way that makes him praiseworthy. So, like for example, salvation. So let's just say cold, stormy night, he wants to save me out of my despair, and so he regenerates me.
All right, so this is bobsled analogy. We probably missed it, but I think what he's going for is this idea that God can watch and then make sure every decision tree goes the way that God wants. And if it does go the way God wants, then God doesn't have to intervene to make it go the way he wants, because he'll just let it play out in those circumstances. It's one of these fatalistic story problems where does the person have free will if God just allows them to do what they want when it aligns with what God wants?
Well, they're affirming a presentist ontology of time because God is there in the moment, actively restraining or letting go. So that's kind of contrary to their atemporal view of God. But then the other issue that they have is that it's God who created the hill. It's God who poured the snow. It's God who created the gravity, the bobsled, and Bob. And so the forces that are pulling Bob towards sin were put there by God. So it's actually, if sin is the thing that he's being drawn towards, then it's God who created that attraction. It's God who's tempting. And not just tempting, but when he lets go, he's actively allowing him to be overcome by temptation so as to sin. And so this Frankfurt, Bignon's bobsled doesn't really work. It has tremendous problems whenever you're applying it to theistic determinism.
Yeah, especially because all actions which will ever occur have truth values from eternity past before we even existed to make those determinations. And so regardless of how we get to it, it's fated to happen. Saying that it's free will, that's not what people think of as free will, where you're fated to do that no matter what. And within their system, even God cannot subvert what he knows will happen. God can't go and change what he knows will happen and subvert this fatalistic chain of events. God is a passive participant. Of course, they'll say, oh, he doesn't want to because this is maximizing and there's no reason to. But no, in their view, he cannot do it. He just doesn't have the ability. God is impotent rather than omnipotent. He's impotent.
Yeah, and especially because they hold to an eternally timeless view of God. There was never a moment where he actually freely decreed anything. I like that.
Roddy says Avengers analogies are much more interesting than bobsled analogies. Yeah, my idea was maybe if I'm interacting with someone, I'll say, here's an analogy from the Marvel universe, and then just go on to describe like Jonah or something. What if there's a prophet?
Do you remember the movie Cool Runnings?
Yes, I do remember that movie.
What was it that they would say before they would go down the hill? Remember they had like that a famous chant or whatever.
Oh no, you're killing me here. I do not know. You're gonna look it up.
I'm gonna look it up right
All
now.
right. All right, I'll hit play while that happens.
Feel the rhythm.
He is
feel the
actively
rhyme. Get on up. It's bobsled time.
Right. I would never come up with that in a million years. That was not part of my memories.
No. So I imagine there's some Calvinists there, and they're like cheering God on as he's like orchestrated and created all of this. Feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme.
It's really funny that their analogies, just the analogies that they use to explain their position, have like an open theist presentation of God within them, because really that's the only option that people have conceptually available to us to understand God. It's all open theism. And I don't think that a timeless God is conceptionable. You can't conceive of him. It's not a concept that can be grasped. Is a God without relation to sequence, who is an eternal now, forever static, unchanging, not subject to time.
And some would say, well, that's because he's transcendent. But I would say that's because it's opposed to reason, it's opposed to logic, it's opposed to reality. And that's why you have in the classical view of God something that is so contrary, so beyond understanding, that they dismiss every bit of God's actual revelation as, empty metaphor and analog. But yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Like I'll I don't know if you remember the James White debate against William Lane Craig. James White is trying to use the example from Genesis, where the son's intention to do harm to Joseph, but God intentions that for good. And William Lane Craig's like, that's my position. You're using a proof text that explains what I believe. That's not your proof text. What are you doing here? Like, all their proof texts are proof texts for a system that they don't agree with. And that's why I like to point out that Calvinist proof texts are very compartmentalized. And so if it's God doing something or determining something or making something happen, that only is speaking towards their predestination, a feature, the facet of how they believe God operates. But they forget and overlook that he's acting sequentially, that he has discursive thinking and knowledge, that he's interacting, that he's responding in those situations, all sorts of things that go against their conception of who God is and how God operates. They're focusing very specifically on the one thing that they want their proof text to prove and ignoring the wider picture that it's drawing of God.
Well, it's like one of the questions, I posted 5 questions in the chat. I've been getting over a cold, and when this was going on, I was in a coughing fit. So I was like, there's no way I'm going live. But I posted 5 questions in the chat, and one of them was, since these guys affirm an all-temporal view of God, can they admit publicly that they deny God has literal foreknowledge and literally predestined anything? And I don't think that question ever got asked.
I think Will Duffy got Vela when Vela was pretending to be Christian. I think he got him to admit that, and that God does not think.
Well, I got Vela to admit God does not think, and I got Anthony Rogers to admit that no, we may say that and it may look like that, but we don't really believe God predestines or foreknows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we better hit play because we've only played maybe a minute of these guys in total, and we're already 30 minutes in. Uh-oh. What kind of review is this? Who hired these guys?
Pushing the button, right? Ding, 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 ding. Because he's praiseworthy for that. So he's going to actually intervene in that story. But when it comes to sinful choices, he has deficient causation. He pulls the reins, similar to Bignon's bobsled, and lets it fall. If I let a ball roll down a hill, you know what it's going to do? It's going to fall. And God doesn't need some magical power in order for it to fall. And I know.
All right, Dan. What you got, Dan? Then we're gonna let Tyler get into the fray as well. Go ahead.
Are they doing a hand raising thing? Just like they're chiming in with hand raises?
I think that's Dan. Dan's just a pretty charitable, respectful guy. I think he came up with that.
I didn't know if they implemented something.
Dan, and we I hold on before you go, Dan. I told Chris and Colton that we was only gonna do this for 2.5 hours roughly. So I kind of want to keep that time frame. It's already 7:30. Time flies by, and I don't want to keep these guys.
It's too late for me to make my Taekwondo class tonight, so I'll just stick around till we're done.
All right, cool. Well, I got a time frame too, so I ain't gonna press that too much. Okay. My wife will beat me over the head if I'm on this thing too long. So
use some Taekwondo on you.
Yes, she would jujitsu me and put me in a triangle chokehold for sure. Dan, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, Dan? We'll let Tyler, because I know Tyler disagrees with certain portions of your argument. So, Dan, go ahead, say what you got to say, and then we'll let Tyler respond to you.
So I'm a classical Arminian, so I hold to total depravity, but I do not hold to utter depravity. And what I think he described is utter depravity, because if the sinful action is one and only one sinful action, then it's kind of like if God presses the button of grace, the person goes up and does the right thing. If not, he does the worst possible thing. But if there's multiple evil options, like, so let's say, for example, Pharaoh. Right, because if there's multiple evil options, why is it that one is determined? In fact, so why is it that God can control things if there's multiple sinful options? Like, let's say, for example, Pharaoh could either let the Israelites go out of self-preservation, or he could hold the Israelites. So why is it there's only one?
So this is actually a good point that Dan is bringing up, that there's multiple ways to fulfill any sequence of events. There's multiple decisions. There's actually infinite ways. Let's take a prophecy, for example. There's a prophecy that says that will say that Tyre, the city of Tyre, is going to be destroyed. Now, I think historically it didn't happen under Nebuchadnezzar, but all sorts of people who salvage the prophecy say things like, well, if you read the text very critically, it says armies, plural, and so it doesn't necessarily mean Nebuchadnezzar, and so maybe like 300 years later, Alexander could come with his army, and that counts as the prophecy fulfillment. What the point that they are illustrating is that there is almost infinite leeway in interpreting and bringing something to pass. There's just infinite options. And so it's not an either or, either one person does this one evil action. There's an infinite number of variations of those actions. How is God allowing them to pick one certain one? And how does that mean that they don't have free will? Because they could have just done almost anything. I think that's what he's going for. I don't know if I explained it the best here.
Well, no, I mean, like, I think Dan brought up a really good point, and that is, look, if God has determined for, and I think I mentioned this on Leighton's program, for some fifth grader to steal a candy bar, what determines the number of candy bars that he steals? Like, why must he steal 2 and not 1? Why must he steal 2 and not 3? Why does he have to steal a Butterfinger and not a Payday or a Baby Ruth?
And of course, the John Calvin answer is there's no secret determinations of the heart. God guides absolutely everything, even everything deep into our heart. And so nothing's fortuitous. No mere permission is what Calvin argues in Calvin's Institutes. And I don't think I've ever met a Calvinist who has read the no mere permission chapter, a huge length of text that Calvin writes about no mere permission. God just doesn't permit things to happen. He makes those things happen. They're not familiar with their own literature, and they're not familiar with the reasons why John Calvin says that it must be the case. God's just not letting things happen. Nothing's outside of God's control. That's demeaning to God, and he uses a lot of choice language to describe people who believe those things. He doesn't like them. And so if Date and Colton are taking this position, Calvin condemns them in his Institutes. No mere permission.
Yep. It's not consistent with historic Calvinism. It seems to be more of this philosophical watering down of theistic determinism, and in order to make it seem more palatable. So I would compare the philosophical defense that Chris, Date, and Colton are levying as the Diet Coke to my Whistle Pig, because it makes it palatable.
Right. Roddy over here in the comments is mentioning Three Musketeers. That's like what old ladies get to hand out on Halloween, and those are the last candies left ever because nobody.
Werther's Originals or whatever it is, like
what I love that Werther's Originals. I will eat those all day.
Dude, I know. Right off camera, you got a hard ceramic coffee candy dish with Werther's Originals and those little strawberry rock candies in there. I know it. I just know it.
I have stopped buying candy except for to give out to people like my kids, but I'm trying. I eat a lot of candy because there's candy dishes everywhere, but I'm trying not to buy any candy. Doesn't seem like a good use of money.
Sinful option. And does your analogy, the bobsled analogy, work if the person isn't always inclined to do the worst possible thing? If the person has multiple evil options.
I just said that
because it doesn't.
The way God
I'm using the logic of it, not what you said.
That's fine, but the way God refrains is also a function to how we sin. So the more he is engaging, the more grace is in the situation, and the more
God decreed he would refrain.
See this
so God is actively refraining.
Right. It's all fatalism. Turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
The more someone is filled with the Spirit and allowing the Spirit to control their life, the more that they're walking with God and doing praiseworthy acts, right? Okay, now, the less they're filled with the Spirit in the sense that they're not walking.
And Leighton Flowers called out Michael Faber and blowing into his microphone. I didn't seem to... That's probably his microphone doing the blowing noises.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
With Christ, and there's no grace in that situation, then the less they do praiseworthy acts. So it's kind of like a function measure. So the more God's involved, the less we sin. right? And then the less God is involved, the more we sin. Edwards has been saying this for hundreds of years.
That
And
that
No,
feels
but
like we're
you're
falling
saying-
into.
you're saying
ahead,
the
Dan.
lack of grace determines the sinful action, but it shouldn't. It because the sinful action should be determined by the person's choice, not by a lack of grace. It's just which sinful action, but all the options are going to be sinful without
Well,
grace.
that is based on an indeterministic view. Yes, I'm in the dialectic. I'm giving a frame for what you asked, right? For the author of analogy, how would this work in a deterministic view? So in that dialectical role, I'm giving you a model. So you can't respond to it by saying, well, in an indeterministic model, that doesn't work. Well, yeah, obviously. But in a
So
deterministic
how does
model, the lack of
how do
grace
you get to
should
one
determine
option
the sin.
in your model? How do you get to one evil option in your model?
Yeah, so the problem with this discussion is it's like they're just fleshing out features of theological models.
They're jello. It's you can't pin it down, because you'll come in and you'll say, what is it about this? And they'll go, oh, well, I thought you were asking from an indeterministic stance. That's why I answered. It's like, well, no, according to you, like, we're here because of what you believe. What do you believe? And they never, I don't think they were ever able to successfully say what the mechanism was that by God withholding grace resulted in that specific sin. They never were able to actually point to the mechanism.
All right.
I think they could have. I just don't think that they wanted to.
I think Tyler Vela's speaking pretty soon. We'll kind of fast forward a little bit, and then we'll see what he says.
I may
Heretic,
need more whistle pig for this.
whistle pig. Okay, let's whistle. I don't know whistle pig. I only buy the cheapest stuff.
I don't buy anything. It was gifted to me.
Right.
I buy Diet Cokes and LaCroix, so that's
Yeah.
all I spend my money on.
Yeah, you are correct. Technically, you are correct. You do not buy anything if you're buying those things.
Colton engaging Dan. So go ahead and inject your question and we'll tackle that. What you got?
Well, mine would be a shifting of gears. It's great. It's great to be on this side of the table, actually. For the first time ever. And I felt it incumbent as the only, non-Christian on the call to say, hey, let's go talk about the Bible for a little bit.
It sounds good so far. Hit us with something.
I wanted to ask a question to Colton for a second. It is a little bit of a philosophical question, but I'm curious if you think that there's any type of argument or objection that could be posed from the garden that Adam and Eve might not have met the epistemic condition of responsibility.
No, because I think the epistemic condition of responsibility is presupposed in the control condition of responsibility.
Yeah, so this is a conversation. Calvinists take on all challengers. And so if an insane atheist or a Buddhist or something like that came on and started attacking them from some sort of random angle, I'd be all for that. So I'm not necessarily opposed to Tyler Vela being on this panel if he's there for the purpose of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair.
So in other words, let's just say I'm backing out of my driveway and there's a cat right there and I killed the cat. We would say epistemically that, because I didn't know that, I'm not morally responsible. But then some people want to say non-actional theorists or intentional agent who specialize in intentional agency would say, but you still freely did it. You still controlled the car. I don't know if I want to say that. Alfred Mealy actually gives a good argument in his 2002 paper that basically says, yes, you didn't know that you killed the cat when you backed up, but it's because you also didn't freely kill the cat. It's one and the same. And
now look at the way that he's arguing.
Very carefully, they seem to also.
Colton is essentially saying you backed the car up over the cat and you killed it. Technically, you killed the cat, but you're not morally responsible because you did not know. And you did not technically kill the cat because you did not know, right? So he's arguing like an epistemic sort of basis, which is completely diametrically opposed to Chris Date's author model, because in that model, God is the one who has written that you will back up over the cat. God knew you were going to back up over the cat. God caused you to back up over the cat. God had the epistemic knowledge. God would be the one held responsible for killing the cat, according to the defense Colton just gave, in Chris Date's model, but they will kind of part ways there in order to try and help one another out instead of making Calvinism look bad.
Yeah, it's interesting that in the Bible, like culpability has an element of negligence as well. And so God finds himself culpable of man's condition in Genesis 6, even though man's condition was not foreknown to him. He's because he was a major actor in putting mankind on earth, which led to this situation. He's accepting some responsibility for the state of affairs.
And you even have the institution of the cities of refuge, where if you accidentally killed a man, you're cutting down a tree and the axe handle falls off and strikes him dead. The family could come after you and they would be, morally justified to put you to death, but you could flee to these cities of refuge. And so in this case, you're not actively, intentionally trying to slay someone, but you're still culpable. And yet, here Colton is trying to give an argument that you're not, which I think is one, contrary to Chris Date's model, but two, contrary to the Bible.
Right. Like I was pulling my car out today. I made extra sure to make sure all my kids were somewhere I could see as I backed out the car, because if I hit them, even unintentionally, it'd probably be my fault. It'd probably be responsible. But that's an interesting conversation, but it has nothing to do with the Bible, as Adam points out. This is Taylor. Vela comes in, says, I want to talk about the Bible. Let's talk about culpabilities.
So presuppose that in their moderate reasoned responsiveness conditions. So the epistemic condition. So even though they try to separate it and they try to say they focus it on the control condition, it's, if you read them very carefully, it seems that the epistemic condition is kind of busting out the seams. And I think that's convincing. So that means if you have the control condition, you will have the epistemic condition, and they come hand in hand. So if Adam and Eve possessed a control condition, then they probably possess the epistemic condition. I have no idea.
If they lacked the epistemic condition, would it work in reverse, that if they lacked epistemic condition, they wouldn't therefore...
Yeah, because like in the car scenario...
So this is supposed to be a discussion about people challenging Calvinism. It's on all these very lofty philosophical, is that person really responsible or not? It doesn't seem like a substantive challenge. It seems like a semantic challenge. Like you're just arguing over word definitions at this point.
Yeah, I don't really see too many people coming to this going, I'm on the fence about Calvinism, and this is really going to help me know whether or not I need to affirm it or deny it. And they're talking about killing cats and writing books. And, you're like, what? I think most people, would.
Oh yeah, they're going to tune out. Like, let's say you're a hardcore Calvinist and you're listening to this. You're like, okay, cat's responsibility, running over the cat. Okay, I'm not a Calvinist anymore. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Since I'm not blameworthy for killing the cat because I didn't know the cat was there. So in an intentional way, since I didn't intend to kill the cat, I wasn't free in killing the cat. So in that sense, yes, if you lack the epistemic condition, then you also lack the control condition.
Okay.
Not everyone that, but
yeah, I would have some follow-up questions, but I want to get to some
I'm curious what Vela thinks this relates to specifically with Calvinism. He asked the question, but then he didn't really press down on it. It was like, there may be an issue here with Calvinism. Okay, you gave me an answer. I'm not going to probe that any further. Let's just move on. I
think he wants his cake and to eat it too. I think he wants to be like a internet Calvinist with the internet Calvinist built-in audience and fame, and talk about internet Calvinist options, even though he's not a Christian.
I think so. I think and Colton's a friend of his still, I believe, and I think he has a great respect for Chris Date. So he wants to be friendly and accepted, because he's not ready to completely write that. He hasn't completely moved to the Myth Vision audience yet. Like he's still in that direction. He hasn't completely transitioned, and he needs to maintain, I think, some degree of.
I think that market's saturated. I don't think there's a place for him there.
No, there isn't.
I want to go to Chris. And this is, some of these are hey, Chris, hope you're doing well.
Hey, Tyler, what passage are you bringing up so I can bring it up on the screen?
I'm going to bring up 3 in conjunction, because they basically say the same thing. It's a similar question. and Chris will be aware of them, but I would love his thoughts. I don't know if I've heard him directly on this before. And that's the use of pos or pontos in Romans 5:8, 1 Corinthians 15:22, and 2 Corinthians 5:14 to 15. These are the basically the three passages that are, one died for all, therefore all live. Some variation on those. We could also bring up Hebrews 2:9 through 10 if we want to, but my question is on these ones. Sorry, 5:18, not 5:8.
I was wondering that too. Yeah.
I knew what he was talking.
Yeah, you notice they're talking about cats a lot, and then Gospel Truth pulls up his web browser. What is his ads? There's a cat in his ad. You're going to scroll back just a little bit. They're spying on him. Uh-oh.
We could also bring up Hebrews 2:9 through 10 if we want to, but
see, look,
Yeah,
there's
look
a cat.
at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
my question is on these ones.
Google spying on him, giving all his ad revenue stuff.
Sorry, 5:18, not 5:8.
I was wondering that too. Yeah.
I knew what he was talking about.
I had it typed out wrong. 5:18. On these, Hebrews 2:9 through 10 seems to be a similar one. How, even on the Reformed understanding, with
Ironic says, is Vela a non-Christian classical theist now? Like, I was talking to this guy on Facebook. I was like, and he's like, oh, Vela's converting away. I said, yeah, he listened to me when I tell Calvinists all the time that you guys don't like the Bible. You guys would probably be happier just as a Platonist. There's a religion for what the things you believe that you don't, the Bible's not weighing you down. And then he converts away to be like just a normal Platonist. And I was like, well, he listened to my advice. And the Calvinist is like, prove that he is listening to your advice. It's like, what? It happened. Okay. It's just a Platonist. And so that's a happy move for him. He could be happier there. That's he's more comfortable with that, because then you don't have to defend the Bible.
This may be the whistle pig talking. It probably is. I'm a lightweight. Okay. But I think from now on, when I'm accused of following a mega Zeus, I'm going to say that his theology is the equivalent of a mega deuce. I think that might be the whistle pig talking, but I think
right. Who's using this terminology except for him? I don't think
it's Vela.
It hasn't.
And people that have watched Vela have adopted the mega Zeus criticism, and it's so bad. Somebody was commenting on my YouTube channel today. They're like, "You still believe in a mega Zeus?" And I'm like, "No, I believe God." And when he says what he said, I don't dismiss it.
Maybe the more astute thing to respond to is like, oh, where did you get those talking points from? Who's feeding you your lines?
Yeah.
Are you critically thinking about anything you're saying? Or are you just repeating something someone told you?
Mm.
Yeah. If you're getting your talking points from an apostate who believes the Bible teaches open theism and coming onto channels and trying to dispute open theism, yeah, you might want to reconsider. That might not be the best strategy.
You believe that Vela was created unable to rightly understand and accept spiritual truth, right? And you're going to go to him for insight on spiritual truth when he is calling Jesus a lunatic. I think that might be indication he's not regenerate, doesn't rightly understand it, if your system is correct. So why would you go to him as a source of understanding? They're not consistent, and I don't think they really care about being consistent. It's just what can be weaponized in the moment.
Yep, it's an in-group, out-group. Vela is still part of the in-group. He's on our team, and so it doesn't matter if he's a Christian or not. He's one of us. We will support him. We will defend him. We will parrot his talking points to the extent we can to attack this out-group. Who's the out-group? Anyone who's not Calvinist. People who are open theists. Vela's on our team. He's protected. In-group, out-group. You see it all the time.
It seems that there is some type of equivocation that has to happen between the all. Maybe not so much in 5:18, but it does seem in the 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and Hebrews passages that there does seem to have to be an equivocation. How do we exegetically justify the change in scope of pos in the preliminary clauses and the following clauses?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me try to rephrase it. Number one, to make sure I understood it. Number two, for the audience so they can understand what you're asking. I think what you're asking is, when a Calvinist like me responds to, say, well, actually, it doesn't even have to be a Calvinist, right? Universalists, for example, will argue from Romans 5:18 that, look, the trespass led to condemnation for all men, so Christ's act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. Presumably those two alls are the same, but of course, as a Calvinist, I respond by, well, it's not even as a Calvinist, it's just this is something that we Calvinists might be a little more aware of than the non-Calvinists typically. That word pas has a semantic range, meaning a number of possible meanings, one of which is not every single one of, but rather every single kind of. And so I will say, yes, it led to justification in life for all men, every kind of person, right? Jew, Gentile, slave, free, male, female, etc. But your challenge is, how do you justify?
Yeah. So then, as through one transgression, there resulted condemnation to all different types of men, sailors, like people who work in plumbing, people with beards, all types of men. Even though one act of righteousness, there resulted justification of life to all types of men. People who are short, are those men? I don't know. I just no, don't hate me if you're short. It was a joke.
What appears to you to be a change, an equivocation, a shifting to that meaning from a different meaning in the first clause, which is one trespass led to condemnation for all men. Right. So the assumption is I take one trespass led to condemnation for all men to mean that what Paul is saying is one trespass led to condemnation for every single human being. But then you think I go on to say one act of righteousness leads to justification in life, not for every single human being, but every kind of human being. And you're saying, what is the justification for shifting those goalposts or the changing which of Pas's range of meanings I'm using in the first clause versus
yes, that's a correct rephrasing.
The second. Am I on track?
Yeah, I think so. I think I already see where you're going to go with it. So I think I already preemptively appreciate your answer. So I look forward to it.
Well, I guess time will tell, won't it?
I want to just throw something in here quick a second. If you're going to say all kinds, you're going to need from the context to be able to justify saying that it means all kinds here. You can't just say, well, this means all kinds.
I agree.
Because.
I agree. So my answer to Tyler's question is I don't, in fact, change the meaning. So when I read Romans 5:18, I don't take it to mean the following. As one trespass led to condemnation for every single human being, so one act of righteousness leads to justification in life for all kinds of men. I don't do that. I read it as one trespass led to condemnation for every kind of person, so one act of righteousness leads to justification in life for every kind of person.
So
in other words, I'm not
total
equivocating.
depravity.
I'm not changing which definition.
He's abandoning one proof text for total depravity.
Yeah.
Of pas I'm using, I'm consistent throughout. But that, of course, raises the question that Michael implied, which is on what exegetical basis, on what context.
So that's one thing we got to realize for debates. It's not the end of the world to lose a proof text. And sometimes just saying, yeah, the verse could be read in this fashion or that fashion. I agree this is not a very good proof text. That might be a proper way to respond in any conversation, especially if they're the ones bringing up the proof text. If you're the one bringing up proof text for your position, you should be pretty sure that there's not alternative, sensible readings, and especially not readings that can be read better when taking the context into account. That shouldn't be your proof text. Your proof text should be something that's solid. It could stand against the scrutiny and alternative rational explanations.
But I don't think the statement, by the sin of one man, condemnation came for all kinds of people, is compatible with the idea that Adam's sin condemned all individuals. I don't think that's compatible. Now, they may try and get into a semantic argument where all types of people are part of all people, but we're back to the same criticism that he was previously trying to avoid. So I don't think that's actually compatible. I don't think Chris was able to dodge that.
Unless Paul, okay, so devil's advocate. Let's say Paul is he has a Jewish audience, and the Jews are very concerned about what Paul has been saying about the Gentiles. And Paul's trying to convince them that there's no difference between Jewish and Gentile believers. this might be like a equalizing statement. It might, the purpose of it might not be total depravity or metaphysics of sin or anything like that. The purpose of this might be to humble Jewish sectarians. And in that sense, that is a plausible reading of this.
Grounds do I justify understanding pos to mean every kind of rather than every single one of? And that I don't think is difficult. Well, can I? Yeah, but let me finish responding to Michael first, and then you can go, and then Michael can go, and we can go round and round and round.
Okay, that wasn't necessary, Chris State.
From the beginning of Romans, it seems to me that Paul's argument is about kinds of people, not every single individual. So famously, right, Romans 2 and 3 are all about how it's both Jew and Gentile who are responsible for sinning. All have fallen short, not just the Gentile, but also the Jew. And that context seems to me to follow all throughout Romans, leading into and beyond the text that we're talking about here. So the answer I give to you, Michael, is that in context, it appears, at least to me, as if Paul is arguing about distinctions between kinds of people, not distinctions between individual people. Now, of course, that doesn't mean I'm saying that there are individuals who haven't sinned. I'm not saying that. I think other texts could be brought to bear on in answering the question, is every single individual sinful and fallen short of the glory of God? But what Paul is arguing, in my opinion, is the distinction between there being no distinction between kinds of people, not every individual. So Tyler, you were going to follow up on the answer I gave to you.
Okay, so this is a point to consider if you're coming on one of these shows to try to challenge someone's view. You're probably not going to want to grab one of their proof texts to talk about one of their proof texts and the meaning of it, because you might lose 5 minutes them explaining that your assumptions about what they think about that proof text are incorrect, and it's just irrelevant to the conversation. A better thing to do to challenge people is to come to them with a verse that directly challenges things that they claim, rather than one of their proof texts to make them clarify on their own proof texts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that'll be a little bit harder hitting. Like, oh, it says here in Genesis, God repented of making man, his own action. Did God repent of his own action? And then they're left trying to explain away the whole context, and it looks very sketchy when they're doing that.
Yeah. No, I think that's
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, you clarify. I was just going to see if before you went into the exegetical reason for why you would read that way, if I was just understanding your position properly. And I think you clarified it. It is essentially, if I could maybe summarize.
Oh, somebody in the side chat was saying they liked my artistic Megazeus. I created that in response to Tyler Vela, and you'll notice that he's holding up a Hebrew Holy Bible.
Okay, so it's a meme that you built that mocks the idea that Yahweh is a Megazeus.
Yes, you'll see he's got the Jewish curls and the Bible, and yeah, I had fun with that.
Sounds good.
Clause is every single person. You would say maybe right doctrine, wrong text. So it is true that every single person is fallen in Adam, but Paul isn't using it that way in that clause. So even though that's true, we shouldn't read that Paul is making such a strong statement here in that first clause.
Yeah, so I love, yes, exactly. Dan really captured something well in a discussion with Leighton Flowers after Dan and I talked at length. He said that I'm a.
So look at how much time is being used to talk about a non-issue just because of the way it's approached.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of jump forward. Maybe there's a follow-on that actually has some substance.
But
all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So
correct.
What I understand that what I read that to mean is every kind of person has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There is no kind of person that has not.
I would agree with that to an extent in the sense that we are talking about Jews and Gentiles here. And this comes to that.
Yeah, they're losing a lot of time talking about this, and so we're going to jump forward again.
Can't continue to talk that way.
I agree.
So I don't know how Paul could be more clear. So he says, it's whoever he's speaking to is under the law, that every mouth might be stopped, that the whole world might be accountable to God. There's none righteous, no, not one. All have sinned. I don't know how Paul could be more clear.
Well, that's fine, Dan, but I think he's being very clear in the way, as I'm understanding him to be arguing, which is that as proof that every kind of person is sinful and in need of salvation, I will offer an Old Testament text in which every single individual is said to be fallen. If it's true of every individual, then it logically follows that it's true of every kind. But
yeah, pushing this point is a waste of time. You just have to go on. If you come into one of those situations, you just press on your next question.
Yeah.
That now, when I start talking about all things that of which that is true, I must no longer have these distinctions between different kinds of balls in mind.
I keep skipping forward. They keep talking about the same thing.
I don't think we missed much. I mean, there was a lot of focus on things that just were like third and fourth tier issues that just really were not at the heart of the open discussion on Calvinism. It just seemed to really just waste a lot of time.
Oh, it's got 130 likes. Do people like talking about all these issues? Or is it like people who like Latent Flowers hit like when Latent Flowers comes on or something? Like I don't know what's generate. I wonder what his watch time is for his average viewer.
I'm not sure.
So I think it's there's
fast-forwarding.
Like Luther, here I stand, I can do no other. And that kind of idea is what we call.
And then Vela falls off. He came on to ask those two things, and then he falls off. What? Okay.
Some real hard-hitting anti-Calvinist questions right there. Thank you, Tyler.
Oh, man. How long was he on? Let's see. He starts at around 2:19, and he's on for like 40 minutes, or maybe 30 minutes. And that's all. He gets out those two questions and then disappears. Wow, that's such a waste. Okay, we're gonna rewind. Here's Latent Flowers, and so if Latent Flowers comes on your program, it's going to feature him quite a lot because people like Latent Flowers. He seems to be a heavy hitter, and so he's probably a draw for viewership. And so we'll see what they do with that.
Justification for your beliefs, absent circular.
Oh, here he's actually asking my question.
Okay, so this is your question. If you were created unable to rightly understand and accept spiritual truth, TD, how do you have any epistemic justification for your beliefs, absent circular appeal to regeneration?
Now, let me clarify this. I wasn't asking how do you have justification for maintaining a false belief. I meant like how do you have any epistemic justification to believe what you presently believe is true? There's a little bit of a nuance here. So like the example I would give is you're a police officer and dispatch, your dispatch is going to give you a false description of the suspect every time because she is naturally incapable of rightly describing the suspect. And so you're told to go to 7-Eleven and arrest a white guy who's 6 foot tall wearing a black shirt and red shorts. But you know she's naturally incapable of giving right descriptions. So why do I have any justification to believe that there's a suspect at 7-Eleven, let alone a white guy who's 6 foot tall wearing a black shirt and red shoes, or red shorts? We know that she's not reliable. We know that she is actually always wrong when it comes to correct descriptions and depictions. And that's the entailment of total depravity. Like John MacArthur said, you're pre-programmed to believe lies. Steve Lawson said your mind is darkened and cannot know the truth. Joel Weber said man's reasoning is destroyed. So if you're unable to rightly understand spiritual truths, it's like you're relying on the dispatch and you're the police officer, but dispatch never gets the description right. So why do you have any justification for going and arresting the suspect?
It's interesting. Like historically, when I've debated Calvinists on various issues, it always comes down to like their last arguments are like, "Oh, you are unregenerate, so you just don't understand the truth of the scriptures that you're quoting, and so you're just unable to realize that the point I'm arguing is true because you just don't have a metaphysical on switch that allows you to understand that."
Mm.
And I think it's funny when the conversation devolves to that point. And so here's an interesting.
What you'll see is Colton, when he's trying to answer my question, he says, "Well, no, we can use any sort of epistemological. We can do internalism, we can do externalism, whatever epistemological device you want. That works because it'll show you we have reasons to believe what we believe." Well, yeah, okay. The police officer who arrests the guy at 7-Eleven had a reason to believe it, but he had no reason to trust that reason because he knows it's always wrong. So, yeah, you may have reasons, but are they really truly valid? And he said, well, absent any defeater, then you have a reason to believe that. Well, the defeater itself is the doctrine because it says they're always going to get that description wrong.
Yeah, their model is one in which it is going to be wrong. And
it entails a defeater. So, but and again, I wasn't on here to like nuance this out for him. So, I'll give him some credit on this. And Colton's answer made me really stop and go do some more research on the topic. So, props to Colton. He's still wrong, but he made me think, and I value and appreciate him. And
yeah, so one problem with people like this idol killer guy asking these types of questions is they're so obtuse that like the answer could go anywhere. The people answering the question might not understand the premise of the question and might
that idol killer guy ask some awful questions.
Yeah, and if you're not on there to explain what you mean, it's like the question. I've often seen questions go ignored by both sides, even if the question is beneficial to one side, because both sides just don't understand the question.
That happens.
What Tim Stratton posits, and if anyone knows me, I'm a big defender against Tim Stratton. I'm like his biggest fan, is what I call myself, kind of arrogantly. But basically, what the argument is, if determinism is true, like you couldn't be able to do anything other than affirm your knowledge that you affirm right now. How could you have any justification for your belief in X, or could you know that X is true, or Y is true, or Z is true? It's something along those lines. And I would just say, okay, pick your favorite flavor of epistemology, and that's your answer. There's nothing in epistemology that necessarily entails a specific metaphysic of free will. And to say otherwise is ridiculous. So I can be an internalist, and I could say, for sure, like I can have direct acquaintance in the same like Poe says, or the McGrew say, I can have direct acquaintance that God, like I am directly acquainted with that belief, even if God determines me to have the belief. There's nothing in there about being justified true belief that also another condition is plus indeterminism for you to access that belief. That's no knowledge or justification theory of knowledge entails indeterminism must be true. So I can still know certain beliefs and still be justified in certain beliefs.
And see, Colton's focusing on like indeterminism, libertarian free will.
Which is not what the question's about.
Yeah, it's not what the question is. And so maybe he just misunderstood what the point of the question is.
And
total depravity says that dispatcher, that calls, that lady that gives you the description of the suspects always gives the wrong description because she's created unable to rightly give a description correctly.
Correct. And so it'd be like having a model of the universe that we're all stuck in the matrix and we're all being fed images straight to our brain and saying, that is the true model of how we experience reality. But then after that, talking about justified true beliefs about our daily experiences. It's like your model of the universe does not line up with you having any justified true beliefs of anything you experience ever, whether or not you say that there's evidence towards those beliefs. Your model itself is the defeater.
Yeah.
Your model's incompatible with truth.
That's it. That was the point.
I can pick externalism. I can do phenomenal conservatism if I want.
Who is this King James guy?
Determinism.
Who's this King James guy talking about? Is he talking about you and me, or what?
I don't know. He says, "Is Calvinism another brand of open theism?" Well, Calvinists often say that open theism is consistent Arminianism. And I would agree there. And but open theism is not Calvinism. Calvinism is based on Neoplatonic conceptions of God that were integrated into the church in the first 3 centuries AD, holding to metaphysical realities as described by Plato. And open theism tends to, not all open theists, hashtag not all open theists, tends to go back to Semitic understandings of reality, how God lives, how God operates, God as a person, God as interacting, God as relational, God with emotions, as the Bible describes. And so I would say it's metaphysically separate, its own category, distinct from Calvinism. Arminianism shares a lot of the same metaphysics with the Calvinists, ironically. And so open theism is just consistent Arminianism.
I wonder, since he's King James only, if he's using that descriptive of Leighton perhaps in the King James terminology, like what Mary wrote into Bethlehem on, or Balaam was saved by. For I wonder if that's the terminology that he's using. You know, like
right.
Yeah,
and
I don't think he's trying to curse or anything. I think he's actually referring to a mule.
Leighton is intelligent enough to have converted a lot of Calvinists away from Calvinism. And so if you think he makes bad arguments or not, you have to contend with the fact that Calvinists hate him because he is a wrecking ball against their system of beliefs.
He's very effective, and he's consistently kind. He's consistently cordial. You may say, well, I don't like his argumentation. Some of his arguments are stronger than others. I think that's fair. I think he would admit to that. But he does tremendous damage against Calvinism. And the question he always brings up is, well, if determinism's true, I'm doing the perfect will of God. So take it up with him. And then you're going to see more of Balaam's donkey type comments coming his way from the Calvinists, because they get really upset.
That one of the questions I was going to ask in the comments, I didn't do it. I was like, is Lizzo's weight optimal for God's glory?
Oh no.
That might have cut a little too close to some of these participants.
Total depravity.
And
I will just add that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the issue is not belief, but justified belief. You don't have any basis
Leighton's
upon which to justify what you believe.
And
if
he doesn't complicate stuff too much. He'll have 3-hour programs that are very simple and easy to understand. So no matter who's tuning in, they get it.
Right.
Knowledge requires indeterminism.
What theory of knowledge requires determinism? I'm not sure that.
Right.
Well, I would say, if you have to have a justified belief, I would say all of them.
Really?
So the traditional, when you're talking about what the definition of knowledge is, traditionally it's defined as justified true belief, or there's some qualifications that are added often, but true belief is one of those qualifications. And so for God to have justified true beliefs about the future, if that's Calvinists are not going to say that God has beliefs. If they're actually using traditional definitions of omniscience, it's an innate knowledge. It's a knowledge that's not dependent on anything. It's one that is ungenerated and co-equal with God. It doesn't arise from anything. It's like a simple, non-discursive, non-complex.
I call it the divine encyclopedia.
Except for encyclopedias have different passages. God's knowledge is not like that in classical omniscience. It's all one whole.
It's one, it's not different pages, it's not different letters. So it's not a perfect analogy, but it contains all information simultaneously.
Right. And so in the classical model of God's omniscience, he doesn't have our description of a justified true belief. He doesn't have beliefs. God does not have beliefs in classical omniscience. He just has knowledge that lines up perfectly with the truth. And so in that type of model, the truth has to exist for his knowledge to line up with, regardless of whether or not God exists, or regardless of whether or not God's omniscience exists. Prior to that, all events have to be fatalistically determined in some in some capacity. And so I think it was before we came on, you were talking about how Braxton Hunter was denying logical steps within
logical
God.
moments. Logical moments in the divine mind. Mm-hmm.
And the problem there is that how they try to get around this God having an aspect of himself dependent on creation is making God's knowledge a stage lower than God determining how the world is going to come about. And these are logical moments and not sequential moments, because they can't have God sequentially gaining knowledge. Because if God decided to create and then created, then God has just gained knowledge of what he would create. God went from a state of indeterministic knowledge to a state of factual, true, direct access to those truth events. That's a change within God, which they can't have. God has to be static, unchanging, simple, and he can't gain knowledge. That would, if God gained knowledge, then traditional omniscience, classical omniscience, is false.
Right. So that, I think that's why the logical moments always fail, because they are, you can have the alphabet as a logical moment. A is not incompatible with B, is not incompatible with C, is not incompatible with Z. And there is a sequence that exists simultaneously known as the alphabet, right? So that would be a logical moment. But within the divine mind and the divine decree, we're told that there's a logical moment where God does not know what world he'll freely create, a logical moment where he determines what world to freely create, and a logical moment where he knows what world he's chosen. But so you have these logical moments of him not knowing and knowing simultaneously eternally, and that's incompatible. That is a flat out contradiction. So, I brought Ryan Mullins on, and he was talking about how many classical theists will eventually concede the point that logical moments are just a useless fiction. So why are we even appealing to those? So let's just go ahead and all agree logical moments are trash, get those off the table. So what you
then they won't have anything. There goes Molinism, there goes Calvinism, there goes classical Arminianism. It's all dead.
Braxton is a Molinist, and I do believe he said he rejected logical moments. So what they would have is God, like a divine simplicity, all knowledge, all omniscience. My criticism of this view is the ethereal fate machine, that it is basically a world engine that just serves as a utility for explanatory power, but is not necessarily logically consistent or free of contradiction. But I think that what we hold to is a living, thinking, intelligent, brilliant, powerful God who is relational, and it's based on a presentist ontology of time. That is the Hebraic depictions of God by God in Scripture.
Right, like why did God destroy the world? Molinists say, well, because that maximizes the utility of all possible created worlds. The Calvinists will say, because the created world needs to maximize God's glory, and that's the route of maximizing God's glory. The open theist says, because he was sad about the state of mankind and sorry he made man. That's why he did it.
And that's what it says in Genesis 6.
That's like, what it says in the text. And so
that's what it says. That's what we're going to go with.
That's why all the debate.
You're a heretic. You believe what the Bible says? Oh, you're a heretic. You believe what the Bible says.
All these
we need
debates
to introduce you to these Greek philosophers.
It's just so funny. They're like, yeah, you can read the text and the text tells you the reason. It's like, we don't have to go out and guess.
Yeah.
And then they have to argue that like the authors like had some sort of secret esoteric knowledge, like
that they didn't disclose,
that they didn't tell anyone about. Yeah. That it's like, oh, these authors knew that people were stupid, and so then they wrote just absolute lies that you should be condemned for believing. Like, what? How is this a model of how the Bible was written? I don't know.
And how would you ever have any assurance that you're understanding it correctly if what was written isn't true?
Listen, Warren, you need the Gnostic enlightening, and you'll just understand the truth of the text.
I got to do that in post with green screen with the little light and the noises.
I did a live stream, which I had at Gnostic Enlightening. I don't know if you ever saw that one, where I was just like,
yeah, I think I may have been with you. I think I may have been on that one.
Like,
it's happening. It's happening.
I get it. I'm Gnostic Enlightening. Oh, wow.
I'm being revealed. The secrets of the universe. I'm downloading them.
Yeah. It's like, wow, this text is a whole new light to me. It's just, wow, I didn't mean anything like that. Oh, wow. But that's pretty funny.
What epistemologist says that?
don't think they have to say it. I think it's sort of an underlying assumption that if you're gonna use the term
No
justified
evidence.
belief, you have to have the basis upon which to justify. You shouldn't even have to say it. Why do you have to say that justified belief requires the ability to actually have a basis for the justification? I mean, that's what we talk about. We don't have to say it because
oh no, that's not what Colton said. Colton didn't say that the epistemologies don't require a basis of justification.
Yeah, what are they doing here? Who's
Basically,
the audience?
Colton is saying you can have justified reasons for false beliefs.
Well, you can, and that's why epistemology is such a contentious field, because just even the definition of knowledge, I took a whole class on it. And so my philosophy professor in college, he is one of the types that if you did not regurgitate exactly what the book said, if you had any novel new ideas about the definition of knowledge, you'd fail his class. You just had to regurgitate all the different people's talking points about what they believed was justified true belief or whatnot, what the definition of knowledge is. They don't have, in reality, because of the way things work, they don't have an actual definition for what knowledge actually means. And so you'll find in these books, epistemology books, all these counterexamples about whether or not a belief is justified or true. Like, let's say you have a broken watch and it's on your hand, and someone asks you the time, you look at it and your watch says 12. And so then you tell them it's 12. You think the watch is not broken. So it's a justified belief because you looked at your watch and your watch told you it's 12 o'clock. And then you believe it's 12 o'clock, and it just so happens that it is 12 o'clock. So not only do you got your justification, you have the truth value of it being true, but is that knowledge? And most people would say, no, that's not knowledge, because you're just accidentally correct. Your justification wasn't good enough. And there's all sorts of counter facts that were not taken into consideration. So even the definition of knowledge is a contentious field of argument. And that's how reality works.
It gets worse, Chris, when somebody comes along and says, hey, your watch is broken. And you're like, yeah, but I have this justified true belief. No. We've presented you the defeater now. We've presented you the defeater. The defeater was the thing you were relying on, the mechanism you were relying on to ascertain truth. That has been revealed to be broken, like your ability to discern spiritual truths. Like we've pointed out the defeater. Yeah, there. You can't point to that anymore and say you're still justified. We've demonstrated the defeater.
Yeah, it's like you believe your watch is broken. Yep. But you believe that your knowledge of what time it is justified because your watch told you. Yep. It's like that Patrick meme, the SpongeBob one where he leads them through all the steps, and then at the very last, instead of getting to the logical conclusion, he denies it. That's what's going on here. Their model is one in which they cannot be assured they have any access to truth. Yeah. I'm reminded of the C.S. Lewis quote. C.S. Lewis had a defeater for atheism, talking about, if atheism is true, then all the thoughts in my head are just the byproduct of chemical reactions that in ultimate reality they've just arisen through natural consequences. In these cases, I don't actually have any good reason to trust my own thoughts. And so if atheism is true, I shouldn't believe in atheism, because there's no reason to believe that my own thoughts are accurate. We think, therefore there is a God. Therefore theism is true, because we can trust, we can understand our own thoughts. And so I do have the quote. I kind of butchered it a little bit, but the feeling's still there.
The point remains.
What he said is that no school of epistemology identifies one of those bases for justification as libertarian freedom.
I'm not saying libertarian freedom. I'm just saying indeterminism.
Or indeterminism, sorry. Indeterminism.
Yeah. If you condensed Chris Dates' screen horizontally, like compacted a little bit, he'd kind of look like you right now with the glasses.
Yeah, we do have a similar style.
Right.
You just have the gray in the beard. We got the glasses, the hair. We're both incredibly good looking.
You just have to squeeze it in just like this a little bit.
I'm not saying that determinism. Well, what I'm saying is that determinism has no basis for justification, because the justification comes from the same source as the belief.
That's just a claim you're making, and what Colton is saying is that that's not a claim that any well-known epistemologists defend or make.
Okay, then what's under determinism? what is the justification for what you believe apart from God causing you?
And poor Leighton, he's probably got better things to do. It's like, I really don't feel like this discussion currently is changing any minds or clarifying anything or teaching anything to anyone new.
I think we could have checked out and come back in 30 minutes later and we would still be in the same mindset that we were previously.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the screen changes. They keep talking about your question. Oh, where does it start? It starts at about 27 and they have it on the screen till 43. Yeah, so
yeah,
a good 20 minutes or so. Less than, but
and that was only one of the questions.
Oh man,
I had 5 of them. I was really hoping they were going to ask all 5 because I was thinking this was going to be kind of like rapid fire, where they come in and they're like, "Hey, here's a question. What's a quick answer? Here's a question. What's a quick answer?" And instead, it was like, "We're going to get into epistemology and whether or not God authored J.K. Rowling's book." And it was just, it was not what I was expecting.
Adam says that's why Kevin Thompson left. He said in the chat he's bored out of his mind. Oh, I don't blame him. Oh, man. Okay, so when we have our discussion with Calvinists, we can't be boring.
I don't think we have to worry about that, Chris.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think we have to worry about that. I think we're both funny and charming, and I think you're more than controversial for the both of us. So I think... I think we'll be fine. I think we both show up. You've got your Jim Beam or whatever it is, and I'll have my whistle pig. And
yeah, that probably wouldn't go over very well.
No, it probably wouldn't. Well, but I think we'll keep it engaging and entertaining.
Did you ever see that? I went on one channel once, and I was drinking Jim Beam the whole time. And after I left, the whole screen, everyone that was pulled on and talking, they all went in this huge rant against me. They're just like, what is he doing? Oh, it's the worst thing in the world. It is the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't need to turn this into a defense of the Bible's recommendation and encouragement of drinking without drunkenness.
Right.
But I think anybody who studied the Bible knows that that's a laughable position. Welch's grape juice was not invented back then. I'm sorry. The preservation method to keep alcohol out of the wine.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing my kids through Hosea, right? And one of the passages is about how wine and new wine both dull the senses. And like the anti-drinking arguments, always like, oh, new wine is different than wine. The new wine was non-alcoholic. It was grape juice, freshly squeezed. And Hosea's like, it dulls the senses. And so
all that sugar. It's all that sugar,
the
man.
Sugar.
The senses.
Yeah, it gets you real hyper. Sugar's okay.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's
like my
really
dad,
funny.
I remember my dad coming in and I was talking to him about alcohol when I was young. And he's like, do you think alcohol is a sin? I said, I think so, Dad. He goes, did you ever use mouthwash? And I said, yeah. He goes, there's alcohol in there. And I go, okay. And he goes, did you spit it all out or did a little bit of it go down the back of your throat? And I go, well, I'm sure probably some did. And he goes, you sinned, didn't you? And I was like, well, no, wait a minute. And he really challenged me and got me thinking, and I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing now. When got my Bible out, started studying it. And he's like, yeah, I just wanted you to think for yourself instead of just going off of what the culture at the church was saying.
Yeah,
he did me a solid there.
Yeah, it's good. I remember my dad, when I asked him, it's like, what's the scriptural evidence that God is omnipresent? And he goes down and he gets a book for systematic theology and he turns to the omnipresent stuff and hands it to me. And I read it. I'm like, what is this? This is like people are quoting songs that people wrote as evidence and out of context proof text. I'm like, what is going on here? And so it's good as a father to let your kids come to their own conclusions by just illustrating the bankruptcy of the intellectual culture, we'll say. But
yeah.
We'll probably have to cut there. We're about 1:30. I don't think this is going anywhere.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
If someone wants to timestamp me all the rants that Chris Date goes on, I'll probably watch those. The Vela portion was a bust. I don't know. It doesn't.
I want to know why God determined this to be so dull and unconvincing.
listen, God determines a lot of dull things. Like, have you ever watched the Friends series? Like, that used to be a show that was on TV.
Oh, with like Ross and Rachel and yeah.
The entire series is dull.
Yeah, you remove the laugh track. You remove the laugh track, and it's just like it's a little creepy.
And you're like, oh, what is this? People, what? Why is this? But yeah. Alrighty, I'll let you go. We had fun tonight. We had a good time drinking. I better go drive around town now. See what's up. See what's happening. See where the happening spots are. I don't know. But
no, man, I'm gonna play some Starfield tonight. I'm gonna watch some TV.
You can't do that after drinking alcohol.
I'm gonna fly a spaceship. You're gonna go drive a family minivan around. I'm gonna hit the grav drive, man. I'm going crazy. I'm gonna take some whole solar systems out with me.
Listen, now that my boys have their learner's permit, I could like make them drive me to places and just drink all I want and just make them wait in the car.
They're your DD.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then I'm the person in the car chaperoning them for their learner's permit on the way home. Kids, don't do that.
Oh man, horrible advice.
These are great ideas.
Huh?
Great ideas. You heard it here. Words of wisdom. Real men of genius.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on and talking about this stuff. Sorry we weren't more entertaining. I don't know. But we will have fun December 16th, 19th, 16th. I think it's 16th.
Yeah, 16th. Just a few days before my 21st birthday.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I'll be good. All right. Yeah, I'm getting old. And so, yeah, don't remind me.
Yeah, December. I'm a December baby, man. So I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna defend dynamic omniscience. I'm gonna hopefully present an engaging and fun defense of it with you. And then a few days later, I'll be celebrating my birthday and Christmas, and then my son's birthday. So it's a good holiday season.
Right. All my girls are born in April, and so that's like where like the financial hit it happens. It's like you're buying all these presents all the time.
My triplets are April babies.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Do you buy only one cake?
Yeah, we buy one cake, but I have to buy like, three distinct sets of gifts, for each of them. I don't want
but
I don't come in and go, here's the horse, you get to ride it today, you get to ride it tomorrow. Like I have to.
But in the long run, you would have been buying multiple cakes, so you're saving on cakes. You're better off with the triplets. Yep. The triplets are saving you money.
On cakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming again, and we'll end there. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Take care.